presentation. And I have a few questions, and this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to ask Catherine a few questions, burning questions that I've had since we planned this event. But then we will then move on to a Q&A with the audience. But I just want to give everyone a reminder: if you purchased the book and have not received it yet, please go to the registration crew. They will give you your book. Okay. Now, I have questions about leadership, about diplomacy, and climate change, obviously. But before I ask my questions, I just have I want to share a few data points that I think is going to be interesting and relevant to your book. And one is only 30% of our elected officials at the federal level are women. And we are actually ranked number 71 in terms of gender equality for elected officials, the number of elected officials. And globally, if you look at the number of ambassadors, only about 21% of all ambassadors in the world are actually women. And out of all the peace negotiations since 2021, all those people who are involved in those negotiations, only 8% or 7 to 8% are women. Maybe that explains why we have conflicts. So your book, one of the objectives or goals that you have in your book is to basically encourage more women to enter politics, to be more involved in public life and I guess also in diplomacy and all that. But at the same time, you spoke very candidly in terms of the hostility and the violence, online violence, and the pressure that you receive as elected official. Why would anyone or any woman in that matter still decide to join politics after learning about your experience? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Do I need that?
Oh, sorry.
No, I can take this. Yeah. Okay, so that's a good question. I thought really hard. So this book took a long time to write. I mean, it was kind of started in COVID, and as you can see, I had my pack rat. Like, I kept everything in my, I guess I've ever received in my life, including all my report cards. Like, it's very odd, but I had time to think about it, and I thought, maybe I shouldn't talk about how, the abuse I received. And then so first of all, why should you go into politics? Because you can make massive change. Like, that's just a thing. You can make a lot of change in politics. And we need people to go into politics. Also, democracy matters. Like, it really matters, and we need good people to step up. Also, diversity matters. You make better decisions. And that's not Catherine Mckenna saying that, that's many McKinsey reports. So we need people to go into politics, in particular women and broader diversity, so we can have, a country where the elected officials represent the country. They look like the country, and they have, an understanding of different perspectives. And that's broader than just, than gender. That's broader than gender, and I talk about that. We had a very diverse cabinet when our first cabinet. The reason I talked about this, so I could have not done this. I could have kind of whitewashed my book. Like, I could have just said nice things about how politics is always amazing every day, it's rosy. And I don't think that's fair. I think people are entitled, we're adults, women are entitled to know that it will be hard. But also because we need change. I don't need sympathy, we need change. And it's just not okay. And I worry because, it's worse now because Donald Trump and, MAGA really normalized in the right. To be honest, yes, there are some issues on the left, I guess, and I find the right-left distinction challenging because I don't know it's necessarily totally accurate. It's certainly not how most Canadians define themselves. But I will say on the right, it's a problem. And it's being normalized. And the last thing we need in Canada is to normalize this kind of behavior. Because who in the right mind would go into politics? So my goal isn't to scare out women from going into politics. It is a bit of a reality check. It's literally also a call to action. And I talk about prescriptions. I'm happy to talk about that, what needs to change from my perspective, including social media companies being held accountable, but politicians being held accountable. They should not be going after doing personal attacks or doxing people. It's not a thing. You can vigorously disagree. I'm not a shrinking violet. probably saw that when I was in politics, but personal attacks lead to, their algorithms are designed to amplify the attacks. We have these are not media outlets, they're rage farming, hate mongering things that are out there, so they will then do their work. And then, you create a lot of division, and it's just not okay. And as I said, Canadians are reasonable, so I think we have to remind ourselves that it's not okay. So that's kind of a little, you can have multiple purposes in the book, so it's a little bit to call it out. I even have a chapter where I was, I don't want to go into a long story, but I was told I had to unblock one of these right-wing like outlets. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm not unblocking you. What the heck are you talking about? They were like, our charter rights are being violated. I was like, that is, like, I'm a lawyer. I'm like, that is BS. Your charter rights are not being violated. Mine are, and every single person that wants to reasonably engage in me that you're now going after. Not okay. And, it was interesting. Like, I go into detail. There was even a campaign. It was actually literally an organized campaign. And when I gave the lawyers access, I was like, go through my social media, just make the case. They found that there was a violence against women in politics campaign. Like, how bizarre is that? It was like totally bizarre. And so that's why I talk about it. I just think it's important. I think it's important that Canadians step up for, democracy, but civility in politics. And I'm not saying be nice. Politics is never going to be exactly nice, but it's just not okay. But to the woman in the room, and to anyone who, wants to run, you should do it. You should have a reason for doing it. You should have your theory of change. It's not just like you go into politics just to hang out in politics. You should do it because it really matters. And I just saw how much impact you can have. And that impact is not just, you get to do highfalutin policy. It's like in constituency offices, you can help people like they're trying to, get like whatever benefits they're entitled to, or family member, to Canada. And so you can impact people's lives, and that really matters. But we gotta change, because it's too hard. The expectations, it was fine, I made it through. And I didn't even leave because of all the hate. In fact, I was like, okay, I guess I'll stay, because then everyone will think I left because I was leaving because of the haters. And I was like, okay, what are we doing now? We gotta do what I think is right. But I do think, like, to everyone here, like, call it out. And also, like, social media is become completely bonkers. I looked at my Facebook, someone of my team posted about the event. I try not to do too much social media. You'll see mine, I get very excited about Olympics and things like that. But it's just, like, filled with hate. Like, my public Facebook, I'm private, but I don't really use it. And it's amazing. I was like, why do we even let these outlets? Like, it's foreign interference, by the way. I'll have every minute or second of every day, but it's also fostering hate and division. But that's a longer topic. But I do think to all the young women here, women, diversity, anyone who wants to get in politics, do it. But also to everyone here, do not allow the bad guys to win. Because the bad guys want to win. They want to chase good people out of politics. That's what they want to do.
Thank you for the answer. You've held multiple leadership positions throughout your career, and I saw in the slides that you've worked and interacted and engaged with, Barack Obama, Antonio Guterres, and other global leaders. What do you think the three attributes that good leaders or great leaders have in common?
Well, I think you need vision. You need to engage people. You have to know what is the plan and why are you running, and people need to believe in it, right? That is really, really important. Then you have to have the discipline to implement the vision. And that can't be everything. Like, sometimes I felt like, including our own, when I was in politics, our own government, we were doing a million things, and like, you can't be great at a million things, but people can't understand what you're actually delivering. So I think the discipline of that, and then you have to bring people together like a team. And I interviewed my swim coach, one of the most winningmost coaches in I don't know if that's even a word, but won the most times as a swim coach at University of Toronto, and I interviewed him on leadership. And you have to be able to build a team. And when you take cabinet, or take more broadly caucus, you got a lot of different personalities there, a lot of Dhofier, definitely. And you have to have people understand that this is bigger than themselves. It's not about them. It's about how are we delivering for Canadians, and everyone's got to do their job. They got to do the work. And you have to work as a team. You can't see it as like someone, cabinet gets an announcement, you don't, and you lose. Like, it has to be, this is an operation, and we are all in it together, and we are doing it with a consistent, purpose and a goal, and that we're going to achieve that as a team, and everyone is going to be bigger than themselves because of that, and that is really hard. And I do talk about that in the book because I think at a certain point that was lacking. And I know people sometimes are like, they're sad, like they're, like you say, not always nice things. I don't know. I just was observing that there was, at a point, our team fell apart, and there were real consequences. And you're in government. You're bloody lucky to be in government. Like, every day, you should be trying to work really hard as a team to improve lives, and suddenly it's more about the people and the intrigue on the team. So that is hard. It is very hard to do because it is a very stressful environment. But I think you can learn a lot of lessons from my swim coach, so for teams. It's interesting. You can take things from outside of other worlds and put into politics. Politicians think politics is very specific and unique. It's not. It's life.
Follow-up question to that. Why do you think, and this predates the social media era, why do we, human beings or people, keep electing bad leaders, those who may not involve in those attributes, right? I mean, is it in our human nature to elect narcissistic, incompetent demagogues?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's okay. The current Prime Minister. Look, we're not America, we're not in the U.S. That would definitely I'd be really questioning people's judgment there. Maybe we don't have enough women, just saying. I'm not even joking. Look, I don't know, the challenge, it's very complicated right now. I think what's happening, it's very easy to pin it on, people are stupid. I don't think people are stupid. I think that a lot has happened. I think COVID had a massive impact, not very positive in many cases. I think that social media is just terrible in terms of how people interact, including on political issues. And there are some, people are worried about their jobs. They're worried about their jobs because of the cost of living, has increased. They're worried about AI. They're worried about all these things. And so I think that is having it's created a real challenge for, politicians that are kind of more, I think, more mainstream, to be honest, and you end up then often getting folks on the extreme, but it's hard to diagnose because, look, I do think, and I think most Canadians may agree, looking at the polling, that we have a prime minister now that people actually believe in. And so I don't think it's always the case. And I think Canadians are pretty good and reasonable. I just think I'm really worried, and not to go on about social media, but these big tech, they're not here to foster democracy. They're here to line their pockets, and often they have a very right-wing agenda, and that is really having an corrosive impact that I don't think we're living in real time. I don't think we're recognizing it or acting in real time to actually make sure that we have protections around that.
I want to now shift to a more international issue. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that we are living at a time where the multilateral world order is under threat, and that's not good for middle powers like Canada. And Mark Carney, even in his Davos speech, said that we live in not in transition, but global rupture. Can you tell us, or I just want to hear your thoughts in terms of the future of multilateralism and also multilateral institutions, and whether there's still hope or future for multilateralism, or we are, entering a world where regionalism and multilateralism is the name of the game.
Well, so the Prime Minister's speech was amazing. It was a great speech. I think the thing I thought that was most powerful was literally a call to action for Europe to get their act together. That not to think that, that we can all just go along and making deals with Donald Trump. We know well that that's a waste of time to think that you're going to have any deal that's going to hold. The one thing though I didn't agree with, so I don't know, maybe shocker alert, but was that we shouldn't lament the decline of a rules-based order. I think we should. It has served us extremely well. We're a middle power, so rules are important. We're not the strongest. But also, justice matters. It matters It matters. Like, it matters to, as we see in our own country, like, it matters that there is, you know, reconciliation and justice for Indigenous peoples, but internationally it really matters because in climate, the people that have done, the countries that have done the least are the ones suffering the most from climate change. Like, so that is just, I have to say that because maybe I'm just a lawyer and I do believe that, you know, rules-based order is important, and what we were able to do post-Second World War was, you know, astonishing. Hopefully that wasn't an aberration, because you know what, Donald Trump will die at one point. Like, I worry sometimes that we're like, everything has totally changed because we've got this guy who survived him once, is way worse, I get it, and there, you know, obviously with Russia, you know, with China, there's like a lot going on. I don't know. I mean, it's hard for sure when it comes to multilateralism. And now, I mean, I think that, you know, Canada's right. We need to go find our allies wherever they are, and it's not going to be perfect. As I say, we've got to work with China. We have to work with China on climate. There's no tackling climate change if you don't work with China. They're the largest emitter and the second largest economy, or maybe very soon the largest economy. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. Like, in a way, I was like, what are my profs in international relations even teaching now, right? Because it is so disruptive, and it's kind of unknowable. But I'm not willing to give up on a rules-based order. I feel like I'm not willing to just say, forget these things, because I think as soon as you do it, it's a little bit like on climate. If you're like, targets don't really matter too hard, let's not do it, then you don't do things. And so I do think that, you know, we should, these institutions still matter. I mean, Donald Trump's got it, what is it called, this peace thing? Luckily we were disinvited to. It's like the best day of my life. What is it called? The Board of Peace. The Board of Peace. Oh my gosh, so Orwellian. But, you know, the, like, that's not going to go anywhere. Obviously the Board of Peace, if you look at who's on it, it's like the least peaceful people. If you're like, I'm going to find the least peaceful people and put it on this board. What's that?
Definitely Board of Peace.
The board, B-O-R-E-D. That's a very good play on words. Yeah, I mean, like, look, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we should still believe in these things, because the problem is if we don't, it's bad for us because we're a middle power, right? Like, we're just never going to be the strongest and the biggest. That's just like a thing. And so that's just worrying because, like, you know, people have nukes. People, like, are, you know, have much larger populations. And we're beside the United States. So there's that. But also, I do really worry about the justice aspect. I do care about what happens in developing countries, especially the least developed. And by the way, that's a national security issue for us, because we already see climate refugees, but generally refugees, people are going to try to, you know, come to countries like Canada. I mean, we're lucky in a way because it's hard to get to us if you're outside of our country. So I don't know. I don't have a satisfactory answer on it. As I say, I'm not willing to give up. Of course, now we need to figure out who we can be working with, and we ought to diversify our trade. And I saw a good stat today that actually, I don't know if I get the number right, it's like we've been able to diversify our trade by 17% while our economy has not totally, you know, hasn't, you know, tanked because of the US. That's actually kind of a win, because our trade is very significant with the United States, and they're really trying to damage our economy. But anyway, I don't know, but it's going to be up to next generation. You guys are going to have to fight for these things. I mean, I will continue doing things, and you know, older people, we're all going to try to do it, but I do think that it is important that we figure out a way to come together. It may be, yes, it might be coalitions of the willing, because the UN is, you know, the Security Council is dysfunctional, but I'm not totally willing to give it all up, because it's not good for Canada, and I don't think it's good for the world, and I don't think it's good for justice.
I want to ask a question about the UN and international institutions. You are now the chair of the United Nations Secretary General's high-level expert.
Don't even try to remember the name. It's even longer than that. On my level expert group, on non-state entities, you know, it's like goes on and on and on and on.
You are the chair of the United Nations Secretary General high-level experts on net zero. That's actually the title.
No, it's longer. It's net zero commitments of financial institutions, corporate cities, and regions. I was like jazzy, and then they called it H-leg for short. I was like H-leg, like terrible.
That's why I have my cell phone. Actually, I had to read.
You have to do okay.
We live at a time where some major emitters are scaling back their climate commitments.
You're very polite.
And at the same time, international climate financing is lacking, and almost by all measures, call it findings from Climate Tracker, we are not on the right path to meet our net zero goal by mid-century. Are you still hopeful? Is there still, reasonable, reliable path to meet?
If we weren't so dumb, we could do it. So I wrote my final report to the UN Secretary General, which I presented in Brazil. And in my report, I go back to first of all, I start when we negotiated the Paris Agreement, climate was not as bad. The climate change was not as bad. It was seen as still a future thing. It is now a thing here. We had 80,000 people who had to leave their communities this summer in Canada because of wildfires. 80,000. It's like a thing. And the costs are massive. And so on the one hand, you have that. So I was like, okay, so 10 years ago, we were working on climate and the risk and costs were not as extreme. So now we have that in our face. So you have that on one side. The other thing the more positive side is that when we were in Paris, we had no idea how to scale these solutions. We did not know how to scale solar and wind and electric vehicles and battery storage in terms of effectiveness or in terms of price. Now, the solar is the cheapest form of electricity in the history of the world, and it's so cheap that it's really probably tanking prospects for LNG. That if you go to, because it's an energy security issue, because if you're reliant on someone else's fossil fuel, that's bad. We've seen that. Russia has used that to its advantage. And so we have these opportunities. We could scale, and it's not even a lot of people there's a lot of talk about new tech. Yes, there are some solutions we still need. For aviation, there's hard to decarbonize sectors, but we have a lot of the solutions. If we just scaled existing solutions, especially solar and wind and battery storage and EVs, we can win. And that is already happening, right? We see, unfortunately, Canada is really falling behind. So when you take EVs, if EVs are now, out of all the new cars that are sold in the world, they're about I'm gonna get this stat wrong. It is, what is the stat? It's I'm now so tired from my journey this morning and time difference. I think that 3 out of every 4 cars sold is an EV, and in Canada it's 9. It's 1 out of 3 or 4. Here, I'll get this right. I will get this. 1 out of every what is my problem on this? So who's got the EV stats? So EVs in the rest of the world. 3 out of every 4 cars sold is an EV. In Canada, it's 1 out of every 9. So 1 out of every 3 or 4, and then it's 1 out of 9. That's so bad. Why are we so bad on that? And I know we've got a supply chain with the U.S. Even in solar compared to the U.S., which we know the U.S. is a problem. They're targeting renewables. They are 50% more installed solar than Canada per cap. And that's not even talking about what's going on in China. But if you go now to, Portugal, or you go to India, they're now just putting solar panels on their balconies of their apartments. Can't do that here. I'm in Ontario, bought a new house in Toronto, and I want to actually put, I'm going to have solar and a heat pump. And it's actually really challenging to do. It's really hard to do, and then I can't actually put my extra energy back on the grid and then get money back. Why would we not do that? So the solutions are there. It's just we need to have to want them badly enough. And I think that the good news is the economy, the market economy, and the prices such that actually in China, large part because of China's been able to scale and reduce price, that we're actually making gains there. So that's what makes me hopeful. The thing that doesn't make me hopeful is now we're not just in a situation where governments are not doing ambitious policies. We're backtracking on policies, and we're actually now preventing in some markets these solutions where you don't even have to subsidize them. You just have to allow them. Donald Trump is blocking offshore wind. I work for one of my clients, very large offshore wind company. They were targeted day one. So they're distorting the actual market. However, it's very hard because in the end, people will buy things that are cheaper and better. So that's happening. But I mean, it's hard right now. Like, is anyone feeling like it's hard on climate? Anyone who cares? And it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to see the backtracking, including in Canada. And it's annoying to see fossil fuel companies be using the same language and the same tactics they were using in 2012, right? Like, it's hard. But am I hopeful? Like, I'm just a practical realist. Like, you just gotta do things. You just gotta go. You just gotta keep on going, and you gotta figure out your new theory of change, like litigation. I'm now going on the board of an organization, Client Earth. They sue, and they do it under commercial law, which I think is actually quite good. So my friends on Bay Street, they should be on notice now that we're gonna be, just looking at fiduciary obligations, like very basic things. So that way people can't get very dramatic and just say, oh, you're just woke or something. It's just actually the law. So I think that, and one other thing that is very powerful for the women in the room, I started an organization, Women Leading on Climate. It's kind of on the side of what I do, but we had a meeting today with all these amazing women leaders on climate. And women are 2.5 times more likely to push for climate action, to talk about climate action. If you have a woman on board, they're more likely to disclose their emissions. That is a good theory of change. We need to get regular women, though, not just women, that are working in the climate world, talking in a way that most people don't actually, to be honest, understand. We need regular women just talking about how it's about the future for their kids. It's about their communities. It's about things they care about. It's about, very practical things like, not being able to get insurance or paying more for insurance. So, but I think it's a tough time, and I think we're all going to have to dig really deep, and I think we're really going to have to push governments, because right now, I think part of the problem on climate is it's very easy if you're a politician to say, well, no one really cares about climate, and then, the polling, because people do internal polling, they're like, well, would you like a job or would you like climate action? So, it's really interesting. Let me tell you how that poll goes. And that's not how people think. I think people really do still care about climate, and they get very concerned about it. Of course, they have other concerns. They have basic concerns, like, paying the bills, but the bills are getting higher because of climate. So I remain hopeful. I just am, sometimes tired, like we were talking about, tired. I feel a little bit tired. I feel like we've been doing a lot of work, and here we are. A lot of that is Donald Trump. It is really, so we'll see it in the midterms. I'm also hopeful about the midterms. But we just have to keep on going. It's like this, it's the long-term goal. It's the stretch goal, and you don't give up on that goal. You never give up. And once you give up, because some people are like, who cares, we'll never meet that target, then you won't try as hard. You just won't. So you just got to keep on going.
Interesting finding. I did not know that women are more inclined to support climate action. I guess Daniel Smith is an anomaly, but...
There are exceptions to every rule.
So why don't we allow the audience to ask questions. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand, state your name and perhaps your affiliation, and May will help to pass the microphone. So let's start with the gentleman.
I'm sorry, I'm like, how did I not get the EV stat right? I think I am quite tired. That was very awkward.
Thank you. My name is Peter Ballin, and I'm with BC Nature, which are naturalist clubs around British Columbia, some 7,000 members. I work in conservation. And when I retired from teaching at Vancouver Community College in UBC, I decided my retirement profession is environmental education and research. So I want to acknowledge your teaching of children and your advice to the UN level. But in between there, we can't wait for the kids. Hopefully they can influence their parents well. What about the rest of us, and particularly the decision makers in corporations and politicians, to understand the fundamentals of our connection to the earth in a way that they don't just understand the carbon cycle and the water cycle and how that works and how we pollute, but that they get it at a deep level so that we understand that this is essential for our environment, for our survival of not only our own species, but the integrity of the planet.
I mean, I wish, it seems like an obvious thing, right? And maybe we need to get them out in nature more, because when I go out, I'm like, why wouldn't we want to protect this? And why wouldn't we see that we're part of this? And that it's not always just about developing things. And that there are real impacts when, you just say, we're just going to go build a new pipeline and just do these things, right? So I don't know. Like, I think with regular people, like when I was Minister of Parks, I was like, this is the best ever, because that's when people are in nature, then they connect with it and then they want to protect it. It's just really hard. Like you would think, I think that's very important for regular people to make the link between climate and nature, because I think we often talk about climate and emissions reductions. It's not very sexy, to be honest. And people can't really, it's very hard to understand because it's so big, how many, how much we have to reduce our emissions. So I wish that people could just go into nature and say, like, this is something that is valuable, that this is intrinsic value. Like there is a lot of work being put into actually putting a monetary price on nature, just so that we can actually be working in the same, playing field as everything else, but that's hard too. So I don't have an answer. Like, I think you're absolutely right. And by the way, like, we're exceeding planetary boundaries far beyond just, when it comes to climate. So, but I don't know. I mean, I assume these people go outside and look out, they look out the window and, what's out there. I don't know. It doesn't seem to motivate them though.
Thank you. There's a lady in the back who, or is it Aman actually? Oh, it's Aman, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Sorry, my name is Maya. I'm a fourth-year university student at SFU, pursuing a bachelor's degree in international studies. I am also the co-founder of a local organization called the White Rock Sussex Climate Corps. We're a group of youth, students, moms working in the community to try to hopefully make a difference. I had a question about community organization. As organizations, even like Nature Kids, and all the wonderful things being done in the community, there's a huge gap in climate literature, sustainability, just community organizations, and kind of bringing people together, really fighting this sense of isolation and loneliness. I find it hard, like you said, sometimes working to make that change, staying consistent. Is there any kind of practical tools or tips you have for community organizations working in the climate space to mobilize communities more effectively?
And so that's a really good question. I think about that a lot, because ultimately it's about people stepping up and saying to their leaders, we want action. I mean, just to put in context though, politicians do pay attention when you have movements. So when we had other climate marches, it seems like it was so long ago, because it's just, I think post-COVID, people got exhausted, but I would, look out the window and point to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and be like, yeah, the kids are in the street. And, the response would be like, do we need to do more? And I was like, yeah, we need to do a lot more. That's what they were saying. And it was young people with their parents and grandparents. And so I think that is really important. To be honest, I feel like it's important in the United States. They got to get out in the streets and just remind people, like, you don't feel alone, right? That is part of the solidarity thing, is so important. I mean, I think it's just mobilizing regular people. And this is now Women Leading in Climate, we are going to be starting a program where the focus is on regular women, and that they can get light training. It's not like the Al Gore reality project. It's not all about understanding everything about the science. It's actually understanding a bit about the science. It's about the impacts, the solutions, and then talking to your friends, like talking to your book club or your church group or your mom's group. Because I think we need to do more of that, it also feels more empowering, right? You don't feel alone, and a lot of people care about climate. Like studies globally have shown 80% of people in their own country believe their government should be doing more. So I don't believe, you got competing things, and in politics you get to vote. It's very complex. Like, you get a vote, and then how are you supposed to weigh every single issue? Right now, our only issue is really Donald Trump. I mean, affordability, yes. So I think it's just continuing to go and organize, but I would say that actually, like, on the streets is a thing. Like, it is noticeable, because the problem is, how do you notice that these amazing groups are doing things? It's hard to know. You know, when you have people out, you know, you can see, and more people will join them. But I think just continuing to do the work. Like, this is going to be a tough time. Like, I think we just have to, like, put a little, like, the Donald Trump thing is really hard in Canada. Like, people are really scared. I'm scared, right? Like, we're talking now our sovereignty, we're talking about everyone's jobs, like, you know, that's really hard. So I think you just keep on going, but do it as groups. Like, don't feel alone. That's what I worry. I worry that people are worried about climate and they're feeling that alone, and that is hard. And then they're online, and that is not very helpful because it's not actually representative. It's getting out there. And there's a great Canadian scientist, Catherine Mckenna. She has a really good book, and I don't know the title of the book, but she talks about the head, heart, hands. You know, the head, you need to understand climate change. The heart, you need to feel it, like, as a nature, as an issue, as something that affects you, that you care about your family, your community. And then your hands, you need something to do. You can't feel like you're helpless, and I think that's why these community groups and what you do is so important. And sometimes it can feel like what I'm doing is so small, but actually it is bringing people together to recognize that it matters to act on this issue, both in small ways, but also to hold governments accountable. But that, I know, can feel day to day a bit unsatisfying.
Okay, next question.
I will be faster. I will be more disciplined myself.
Maybe on that side, the gentleman, and then Aaron.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. My name is Eva, and I'm an interdisciplinary researcher on how we can use law to leverage change towards sustainability. Thank you. And my question is, at the end of your presentation, you mentioned how there's some sort of positive directions that you see, I think, in terms of financial aspects. And I'm curious if you could elaborate a bit more on that, and if it's relevant to piggyback off of that, the role that you see different types of environmental rights playing in constraining the market of natural capital, and the way that human rights constrain the labor market. Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Very deep questions. We did have a good conversation before, and it's great, the research you're doing. I mean, look, I see, like, as I said, like, it's just actually just the solutions are better and cheaper. So that is, like, part of it. I do work for Temasek, which is Singapore's sovereign wealth fund. I'm an advisor on sustainability, and they're like, you know, the long-term investors understand risk. They have to understand risk. So that is having a disciplinary impact, not as much as we would like. I would like our pensions to be much more disciplined on this, because this is our workers' money. But they are actually demanding that the shorter-term investors, like, they look at companies and other financial institutions, and they are looking at how they're investing their money, and are they doing it in a way that, you know, is taking into account the massive risk. It's really seen probably mostly through a risk frame. I mean, on the, you know, environmental rights, I mean, maybe it's partly litigation, and I think you're seeing, you know, that there's litigation that are making advances, and it's, you know, it's around the world. The International Court of Justice had a really important finding that can be used. You know, it's not directly, you know, applicable. Well, it's applicable in Canadian law. It's not like a precedent, but it actually does advance, and it can be used in cases. So I think there's movement. It's just like, what does this all add up to? And it's scale and time. Like, we need it to be super fast and super big to do this. And that's why I think you always have to think, what is the most effective way? But moving the money is totally key. Like, that report that we did on greenwashing, that was like the #1 thing. It was like, the money's got to go from dirty to clean. That's just what has to happen. We need tons of money. And there's a lot of money out there, by the way. There's a lot of money flowing around. It's just going to the wrong things still. But not in China. I mean, China, you know, for whatever faults, like, is actually scaling them, you know, and really scaling its investments. And it looks like its emissions, if it not only peaks, they're going down, which would be amazing. They don't necessarily disclose in the most transparent way, but
We have.
that wasn't short. Was that very long? Sorry.
We have time for 2 more questions.
We can combine questions if we want. That's always very
More than
confusing for everyone, especially the answer. But
yeah, but the
there's
gentleman in
two.
the middle has been waiting. And then Aaron.
Hi, my name is Michael Small. I used to be a Canadian diplomat, including working on these issues, and now with SFU also doing public awareness. But my question I want to ask is actually very immediately political in Canada. It would seem to me, obviously, we're not in the same kind of political environment for bold steps forward in political support compared to 2015, 2016 when you first entered that portfolio. But it would seem, especially in 2026, that there's some underused possibilities for elevating. I mean, let's face it, these issues have a very low public profile at the moment, probably a higher base of support than you would recognize by what you see in political rhetoric. But do you think between the incredible war against renewable energy projects from the United States and the clear desire of Canadians to differentiate ourselves, not only to ourselves but to the rest of the world on a lot of issues, including this one, and when I look at the recent automobile strategy, I thought, well, this actually looks quite a lot like a climate policy. It just isn't calling itself one. So is there space to kind of begin to creep out a bit more in public and talk about this at the political level, or is it still an adverse time to, declare these ambitions?
I mean, look, it's bonkers, right? Like, I mean, you gotta be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, like, as I say, Donald Trump isn't gonna be around forever, and we're still gonna have a climate crisis. So, like, you gotta keep on doing things, and there's a massive cost of the climate crisis, and there's a huge economic opportunity that we want to win in. So, yes, I think that framing it differently is fine. I'm, like, kind of agnostic, like, how you frame it. But we should be doing big plays. And we should recognize, by the way, that the oil sands companies are largely foreign-owned, largely American-owned, and largely funded by people, like, owned by people who are, like, totally antithetical to not just climate but democracy. So we should acknowledge those things. But I think that there's huge plays. Like, we should be electrifying everything. So we should be able to build transmission lines between provinces, which we haven't been able to do. We're talking about interprovincial trade barriers. We should be like, that's a barrier. We can't, like, sell. We can't have clean energy go between provinces. But that was hard. I worked on as we call it, FBT relations. Like, I was like, is there relations? And sometimes I worry, like, I'm like, is Canada a country? Like, what is our problem here? Like, we're always like moaning about problems with us. Like, there's a whole big world and we gotta, get our act together. So, but I think, look, there are plays, but people have to push, right? And leadership really matters in this space and figuring out how to do it. And so, but I think we should get transmission lines between provinces and really push for renewable energy and have incentives and sticks for provinces who have the most renewable energy, Alberta and Saskatchewan, looking at you, that aren't doing things. They're actually putting barriers in place. Because I think there's a huge opportunity, but we should also be tapping into every Canadian. Every Canadian should have solar panels. Why don't we have solar panels and battery storage and heat pumps? Saves people money. It's like, it's an affordability thing. Like, look, I can have a ton of ideas. I'm not in government, but there are definitely ways to do this. You can frame it, as I said, climate is an everything thing. You can frame it in an affordability lens. You can frame it in a interprovincial trade lens. You can do a sovereignty lens. You can do it in national security. I can do it in anything. You just have to want to do it, though.
Last question. I am notorious for.
Do we have two? I think we have. I just feel badly.
I know. Aman has a.
I think we have one too. Just
let me take my turn to say thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I'm Erin Williams with the Asia Pacific Foundation, which means I'm drawn to asking a question about your earlier career. I'm a little tempted to ask about the Komodo dragon, but I think I'm just going to look for the documentary. And
just don't get like a spit on you because you will die.
I will. Maybe that's all I need to know.
That's all you need to know. They swim too. They do swim.
What I did want to ask about is your experience in East Timor, because it's historically rare for a country to come into the world as a new state. It's rarer still to be on the ground witnessing that happening, like you were. And the track record for kind of new countries, especially post-conflict, is not a good one. It's pretty heartbreaking. You can use South Sudan, Eritrea, sort of the Balkans in the 90s. I saw a stat recently, though, that ranked all 11 Southeast Asian countries on civil and political rights. East Timor was the highest one by far. And it kind of surprised me, again, just thinking about this track record. And I was just wondering if there was, in the time that you were there, was there anything that you saw at the time or have reflected on since then that made you feel, I think this is going to turn out okay here?
So, I mean, there's an easy answer and there's a complicated answer. I mean, part of the easy answer about why this was a very successful peacekeeping mission, it was really clear who the bad guys were, right? And the bad guys were able, like, first of all, Indonesia was bad, but then they were kind of using militias. And then the militias, like, were gone, right? So, I mean, there was definitely conflict, there was still, like, you know, there were people and families where they might have been on either side, but it was pretty clear, like, the population, like, a lot of these things are not, there's no peace to be had, right? Whereas in this case, you know, once Indonesia removed itself and the militias were largely, I mean, many of them, I think, probably went across to West Timor or wherever, there was that. Why is it successful? And it's fragile, and it's always fragile, because I remember I don't know, some of my friends here, we might remember it was like 2002 was independence, but maybe 2008 there was like a big incident, and, like, you know, democracy is really hard, and people there, you know, basic needs aren't even being met. So I don't know if there's any amazing lessons. I mean, I saw some bad things where, like, people are like, well, we are very smart people from outside of, you know, this place, and we are going to build these very complicated structures. You know, there's that. But I think, you know, the East Timorese were very involved, and I think that was really, really important. So I don't know. I mean, it's definitely seen as a success story. I mean, there are challenges, but it's actually heartening to hear you say, because I haven't paid as much attention, but to see on civil and political rights, they're really high. That's great. And one more, yes.
One more, Aman, in the back, please.
Oh shoot, we have two more. Okay, I just feel like this lady is so that you've been waiting very patiently. So if everyone can wait, we'll do two.
I'm one of the members here at CIC. So, in terms of green transition and renewables transition, you know, China is a big supplier, I mean, globally, and it's an indispensable actor in that regard. But also, if we look at the supply chains of these technologies, you know, nickel, cobalt, rare earth, and these critical minerals, what has happened to Myanmar? I mean, a big chunk of the Chinese high production is sourcing, you know, from Myanmar. The kind of environmental degradation which exists. So on one hand, we have fossil fuels, you know, I mean, we know the story is very dangerous, but also we have this supply chain which are not really, you know, to the standards we would like. So how do you deal with this kind of challenge?
Why don't I take two? That's a very good question. We'll take a final question.
Thank you very much for being here and for all that you've shared with us. I ran in 2015 federally.
Congratulations.
Thank you, but I ran in a stronghold that was not expected to turn, but that's okay. In fact, it partially was impacted by the Liberal win, which is fine, because I agreed with your point on why you ran in the first place. So I work in mental health and education locally. I've also worked internationally. We have a municipal election coming up in October. And I've read that the most important forum for addressing climate change is at the municipal level. So I'm wondering what you would offer to our next mayor of Vancouver.
He's here, it's good.
I know, I'm trying to be diplomatic. And I know he has a large bank of experience, but I'm wondering what the number one priority would be at the civic level.
I mean, I'll start with this just because it's fresh in my mind. I mean, I think the number one priority is to meet people's needs, like to actually do things that improve people's lives that are related to climate, because that, you know, people need to understand what is this climate thing of which we speak, where we have these solutions. So I think, you know, Gregor Robertson, he's a good friend of mine, and he was, you know, he really cared about climate, and he was able to do a lot of things. And I mean, maybe people differ, but, you know, I think there were practical things that actually did improve lives. And then at the same time, he also, you know, really was focused on the economy. And so, like, you know, clean tech economy, like in creating jobs. I think you got to go to basics in politics. And I worry sometimes that we talk up here and then we overpromise and then we underdeliver. And so I think it's really thinking about, you know, you got to build houses. It was just a thing that we got a crisis here, you know. And so, how do you do that? Well, you save people money, so you make them energy efficient. Like, there are no easy things, right? Like, is everything there's going to be someone who's not going to be happy with you, or it could be very loud. But I think there's a variety of different ways, and I think actually Vancouver's been largely successful. I don't think recently there's been as much action, but I mean, I think there are really amazing ways. I do work with an organization that's called Swimmable Cities. Like, actually, and I saw Vancouver's is focused on that. Like, that's an accessibility and inclusivity, and it's a measure of sustainability. Because it's like, where can you go to public waters and swim in them? Like, are they clean? Which also relates to your wastewater. So I think there's ways of framing things, and there's ways of making it real to people, but you've got to make it real. And it's hard because you don't have a long mandate, and then people will, you know, start saying, "What did you do? What did you do for me?" So I think you got to set out what you're going to do, and some of the things will be longer term, and you won't see the results in your own term. But some of them, you do have to have things that people can point to. So good luck, I guess. To whomever, I don't know who I'm talking to. Just good luck. Okay, and to your question, I mean, look, it is really complicated, right? These things are complicated. But that doesn't mean we don't want to do the energy transition and just stay on fossil fuels, right? Because they're far more polluted. We're just going to like destroy our planet. Having said that, the real impacts of mining these, these critical minerals is a real problem, often in places. So I think you got to do both. And it's not an excuse that we have the energy transition, so we don't care about human rights and we don't care about degradation around the communities where this happened. It's very hard, and some of our mining companies have a terrible track record, and we tried to work on that. But I mean, I think, and I don't think you're doing this, but sometimes, like, I'm in events and they're like, well, EVs are terrible, so we can't do EVs. And I was like, there are problems with everything, right? It's just, in a way, you've got to prioritize things, and then you've got to minimize the impacts of things that are problematic. So that is hard, but I don't know, hard things. The other thing I have, so I have logos, slogans on everything. I have a pillow that says hard things are hard, because I say it's hard. Hard things are hard. Just got to figure it out, and just, one foot in front of the other. But it is terrible in many of these places. Very poor countries, so they're not even benefiting. And we are. So that is, obviously, it's a broader problem, which is climate.
Okay, that wraps our discussions. But before we finish and get to the book signing, Catherine, I just have two quick things. One is, when I was listening to your presentation, I couldn't help but thinking about my executive team members who are young, the vast majority are female, and it's so heartwarming that you talk about things that are so relatable to them, not me. I'm just supporting middle-aged guy. But
with an Indonesian.
Oh,
yeah.
But I think it's really important for us to have discussions like this, and I also want everyone to acknowledge and recognize my team members' contribution. Please stand up, guys. I want everyone, all my team members, so everybody can see.
Many of them are already scared.
They're not paid. We're all volunteers, and they do it. And some of them have been with CIC for 3 years. And I'm so annoying, by the way, with my requests and text messages and all that. But they stuck with CIC, and they do it because they just believe in the cause, that spirit of service. So I just want to basically acknowledge everyone for their work. The second is that when we have a speaker, we usually give them a gift. But tonight is special because the gift came not from CIC, but actually from one of our members, and that is your friend Ken Patton, who has a special gift for you, and he made it himself. And
so you have to know that Helen and Ken, we knew each other from our Indonesian days. We would have